This is one in a series of webinars from the Easy Living team, and our experts have put together some webinars based on some of the most frequently asked questions that we get from family caregivers and some of the material that we've written online. So feel free to go to our website, easylivingfl.com, for tons of blog posts and great information on all kinds of topics like this. But for today, we're going to talk a little bit about a touchy subject: quick ways to get kicked out of assisted living and how not to. So for many of us, it's a challenging transition for our aging parents to make the move to assisted living. So they often may struggle with the idea of leaving home, and some go more willingly than others, but after we've gone through the process, the last thing we want to is to get a call saying they're being kicked out. But unfortunately, it happens more often than you might expect. And in our care management team and our home health team at Easy Living, something we get a lot of calls about from frustrated family members who don't know what to do and are facing this situation. So it's something we knew was really important to address and to help you hopefully put some preventative measures into place, deal with the problem when it occurs, and know what to do when you're stuck in a crisis. So here we go. We'll get started, and hopefully it'll provide a lot of valuable information for you. So, how can a facility kick a resident out? What are the rules about this? What are the laws? Well, it's not actually that difficult of a process. There are procedures in place, and as an example, in Florida, the Florida law allows for a facility to give a 45-day notice if they document a reason for kicking the resident out or asking the resident to move to another facility. And even that can be waived if the resident is certified by a doctor to require emergency relocation, so they need a higher level of care, for example, or they've been conducting themselves in a harmful or offensive manner that could affect, other residents or employees. So the 45-day notice can even be waived, but facilities do have to document reasons. They can't just say, they don't like you, but in reality, there's a lot of reasons that can fall under the, what's allowed in the regulations. The facility obviously is designed to provide a level of care to a number of people, and that's the safety of all the residents is important, so that's something to keep in mind. So some of the common reasons we'll talk about, but it's just important to know those rules, and also you can check with your particular state, find out what the rules are and what the procedure is as well, and we'll talk more about that later and kind of how the process might go. So some of the common reasons that we see residents getting kicked out are smoking in the facility, so that's why we had our title slide there, or smoking outside the designated areas, and obviously things like violence towards other residents or staff. That can also include things like sexual harassment of staff. So a lot of these things, as you'll see, can be particularly difficult if you have a loved one that might have memory or behavior issues related to a memory disorder. But again, keeping in mind that the facility has to protect their employees and other residents. If your loved one is having frequent falls, this is a clear warning sign for the facility that they cannot provide the level of care needed, and they're concerned about your loved one's safety and also potentially getting sued and all those kinds of things. If your loved one is acting out, so yelling, acting paranoid towards other residents, wandering into rooms, just basically doing things that, if you can imagine when you were in university dorm or something, if people were doing, would cause disruption among other residents. And so these kind of behaviors, even if somewhat minor, could definitely be a red flag. Refusal to adhere to set rules or the schedule. So again, they can say, we can't meet your needs because you're refusing to come to meals and asking for things outside of what we're able to provide. So again, this is where it can be kind of broad, actually. Challenging dementia symptoms are a big one. So a facility may tell you when you go to choose the facility that they can, they have a lot of residents with dementia and they can handle it. But it may really depend on what's going on. So elopement or someone trying to leave the facility is a huge problem for them if it's not a locked facility. that specifically deals with that kind of dimension, those kind of issues, that's likely to be an immediate reason for concern. Things like refusing care or medication, and also paranoia. So maybe if your loved one is accusing the staff of things over and over again, these kind of things, it can be very challenging for them to provide the care. Certain sexual behavior and harassment, and that can even be sexual behavior among residents. So your loved one may find a boyfriend or girlfriend at the facility, and it's not uncommon at all for us to get calls about having a care plan meeting about some of these issues going on. Maybe the other resident's family is complaining, or other residents have seen behavior in public that bothers them. So we'll talk about solutions a bit, but this is not an uncommon one either. And of course, increased need for care is another big one. So what can you do? The first step obviously is prevention, and this begins right from the start with choosing the right facility. So our team does a lot of independent assessments and helping people find the right facility. You don't necessarily have to use a professional, but this is one of the advantages, is using a care manager who is very familiar with facilities and what they can and cannot manage, what's realistic, and also really digging into what your loved one might need and some of the things that you might not really even know if your loved one's been living at home, and kind of covering some of the problems that they're having. So we can dig into this pretty well and help get the right place. And why this is particularly important is because a facility is typically, marketing to you, trying to fill their rooms. This isn't to say anything bad about facilities, but that's the role that they play, whereas an independent assessment, an independent care manager is hired by you to find the right place. And just a quick word on how the way care managers work: we're paid by the family or the client for time for professional consulting. So we're not paid by the facility. There are some services that are paid, for making referrals and that kind of thing. But we're not, so it's strictly independent. So it also means that we can access any kind of facility, very small, very large, very inexpensive, very expensive, under Medicaid programs or not, all that kind of thing. So anyway, even if you don't use a professional, just make sure you do your homework. Make sure you're very clear about what your loved one needs. Make sure you dig into what your loved one needs a little bit. Again, especially if they've been living alone and providing things for themselves. And maybe it takes some time to kind of do your own assessment of what kind of things they're going to need. So that's very important right from the beginning, because that can make or break the difference in terms of whether you're hearing from them 3 weeks or a month into it saying they can't provide the level of care you need. You want to make sure it's that right fit. And that's best for the facility too. So when we go in and work with facilities and work with clients, the facilities appreciate having all the information and knowing all of that. So it's a vital step, obviously. The second part is understanding the policies and procedures. What can the facility do and what can't they do? Reading carefully your contract and all of those things, asking questions up front. And then as you won't always think of everything up front. A care manager can also help with that, because we have a lot of experience, know what to anticipate. We know little tricks to kind of tell you to make the transition easier. But just asking those questions, as they come up, and finding out those things are important. Because again, remember, a facility is a group situation. So there are certain procedures and policies they want residents to follow so that they can manage the care of a number of residents. Also, really important is getting to know the staff. Who's who? Who do you need to talk to when there's a certain problem? And just being friendly towards them, saying thank you, being grateful when they do things that are helpful. This way, if you have concerns, complaints, or if they have concerns or complaints, you have that relationship established, which makes things much easier. And you also know, who to ask what's going on, who sees your loved one on a regular basis, who has what role, those kind of things. So that's really key there. And checking in regularly is part of that. It also means you're seeing how your loved one's doing. You're seeing, what's going on with other residents. You might notice small things that might in the end become a problem. So you can spot and troubleshoot those earlier. And for these last two in particular, if you live out of town, this is also where hiring a care manager to make check-in visits to a facility is vital if you don't have someone local. It's sometimes misunderstood because a family caregiver will think, oh, I've moved my loved one, into a facility now, and they'll contact me if anything happens, and my loved one is safe and taken care of, which is all true. But I still think it can be really vital if you don't have someone that can check in regularly. So if you have family there that can check in on a regular basis, that may not be needed as much. But a care manager can also be on call if there's an emergency or a problem. So that can be a really a peace of mind kind of service. But just having someone to be checking in, to be reading care plans, checking the client's chart, seeing what's going on, can really, again, pick up on things before they become a problem. And when you or an advocate are checking in regularly, the staff knows there's someone they can turn to. They don't feel kind of that if there's a problem, they're kind of left to deal with it. And I think that can exacerbate and make the process of giving that notice quicker, of course. So if problems are already happening and it's requiring intervention at this point, the first step is understanding what's really going on. What are the root causes of the issue? So, and this can mean things like loved one is acting out, and maybe there's a noise that's happening that's bothering them. Maybe they've been seated at a table for lunch with someone that bothers them for some reason. It can be, there's so many little things that can be causing some of these behaviors, physical causes, of course, too. So looking at the root causes, and this may require having someone visit over several days. Number C is doing an evaluation, so we'll talk more about that. But trying to figure this out, getting a lot of data and information about what's going on, what's really happening. And by checking in regularly, you'll often have a good idea of this before it becomes a problem. A care plan meeting is an essential tool. So when you get a call from a facility talking about a problem, I would immediately schedule a care plan meeting. Say, let's get together the vital people who care for my loved one, the key managers, and maybe even the person that cares, that's having the issue, that's maybe a direct caregiver in the facility, to talk about what's going on and come up with solutions. It shows you're proactive, it gives the staff a lot of confidence, and it helps to come up with solutions, and then planning from that. There's a lot of creative solutions that can go into this. It may be something as simple as mentioned earlier, changing the table that your loved one's sitting at because they're getting annoyed with someone. So there's all kinds of things like that. And part of that is getting an evaluation. So if there's a physical cause, maybe there's an assistive device needed, something to help with eating, something to help with them getting around, not falling, those kind of things. And private caregivers to supplement the care at the facility may be something that you need to do at least temporarily or for certain periods that are key problems. If it's getting up in the morning, if there's a time when the loved one tends to wander, this can work really well without them having to move. So that's something that you can get more information on to see if that might be useful and maybe suggest to the facility. And again, even sometimes as a temporary solution. Unfortunately, sometimes it's too late. You've already gotten that notice and they're talking about kicking out your loved one. So you can talk to the administrator, see if there's anything that can be done. Hopefully you've taken some of the previous steps. You can also talk to your state's ombudsman program, which are advocates volunteers from the state that intervene, and you can find that information. All facilities have to post resident rights and the contact information there, so they may be able to help and intervene. And again, the earlier you can get them involved, the better if other things have failed. Finally, if you have to move, obviously you want to get a great assessment of where to go. It's going to be difficult sometimes to find a place after being kicked out, so this is where it's time to probably call a care manager in. Also to make a plan for a smooth transition and get off on the right foot so you don't have to worry about this happening again. So we have lots more information. Please go to easylivingfl.com. You can find our contact information, so you can feel free to send us a note. I'm Shannon Martin, the Director of Communications, and you can send an email and ask us more questions. You can also leave comments here and find lots more articles and information there, as well as our services and how we can help. Thanks, and good luck with all your caregiving journeys.